If you've been scrolling through TikTok, you will know that the Douyin glittery eyeshadow look, that wet looking eyeshadow, is very popular right now and everybody is trying to achieve that look. So two very popular K-beauty brands, their eyeshadow palettes are very hyped up and very well talked about on TikTok, and it's the UNLEASHIA Glitterpedia palette and the ROM and Better Than palettes. These two brands are very well loved, and I do own a couple of these eyeshadow palettes myself, and I want to do a comparison video into like which eyeshadow palette should you pick up. And without further ado, let's get into it. Currently, I do own 4 of the ROM and Better Than palettes, as well as 2 of the UNLEASHIA Glitterpedia palettes. This is All Off Brown and the All Off Glitter palette. For the ease of comparison, we will be comparing these two eyeshadow palettes over here. They are brown palettes and it's just easier for comparison, apples to apples, so that's why I kind of did a similar eye look-ish on both my eyes. Let's start off with the price point of these two palettes. These two palettes usually range between $13 US to $16 US on YesStyle. The price there does fluctuate plus minus by $1 to $2 US, so you can check it out on YesStyle, and you can use my code It's Crystal to help you save some money if you'd like to support me. And if you do use my code, thank you so much. And if you want more information, links down in the description box below for you to check out. For under $18 US, for UNLEASHIA you would get 9 shades, and for ROMAND you would get 10 shades. Between the two brands, ROMAND has released multiple palettes at this point with their different collections and the main lineup in general. So they have various color stories for you to choose from compared to UNLEASHIA. However, in terms of color stories, I must say that UNLEASHIA's color stories in their 9 pans are much more unique, very different from what you see in a standard K-beauty brand. One thing that both brands do really well when it comes to their shadow palettes is that if you look at these palettes over here, and if I were to grayscale this right now, you would see there's a tonal range where the shadows are both like a light white or light grey, and then it goes to a deep dark grey. That means the brands have actually kept into consideration when it comes to making such palettes, and when it comes to creating eye looks, you are able to add shadow, which is depth, and also light to bring forward your whatever eye looks that you want to create. However, looking at the screen right now, I would think that ROMAND does marginally, just slightly better, because you can see it ranges from very deep dark to a very light white or light beige matte. So you have this as like you're building up blocks of your eye look. And in terms of like color, I think that the ROMAND shadows are slightly more saturated as compared to the UNLEASHIA ones. Now both brands UNLEASHIA and ROMAND do have an all glitter palette. I do have this UNLEASHIA one over here, right? I don't own the ROMAND one. I do think that is like a signature all glitter palette that a lot of brands do nowadays as well. However, if you are like a beginner or just like experimenting with glitters, you're not really sure if you want to commit and buy like a full all glitter palette, I wouldn't recommend getting the all glitter palette. Instead, I would recommend maybe checking out something like this, so at least you have some like daily colors, mattes, shimmers you can still play around with, and you still have like 2 glitters. Now we're gonna dive into the formulas of the shadows themselves. Let's start off the mattes. The mattes of the UNLEASHIA ones are a little bit more buttery, smooth compared to the ROMAND ones. That's one thing I noticed. The ROMAND ones feel a little bit dry, not gonna lie, when I swatch it on the back of my hand. However, on the flip side, I do think that the ROMAND mattes are much more buildable in terms of color and opacity compared to the UNLEASHIA's mattes. With the ROMAND mattes, you actually can build the colors and you can get quite intense color payoff as well. And one thing that is a kind of like a deal breaker for me is that I like the flexibility of working with shadows that allows me to build up or tone down the opacity. So that was a very key thing for me, because there are some days where I don't really want a barely there eyeshadow look and I have to like reach out for another palette. I want to have one palette that I'm able to just work with depending on the amount of product that I use, the technique and things like that. So I really do think that the mattes in ROMAND, it's quite workable for me at least. For the shimmer formula, both brands do have like your standard regular shimmers, which it low-key feels like a slightly shinier satin eyeshadow look. I personally just feel quite lukewarm towards it. There's nothing really much like spectacular to write home about. Your fingers, and you just go in and you can have an eye look. Very easy to work with, that's for sure, but it's nothing as exciting, I would say, as like a glitter, for example. Now this is where it might be a deal breaker for you, the glitters. The glitters in these two palettes are quite different. Unleashia's glitters have little to no base pigment at all, so it's almost like a transparent base. If not, it's like a hint of color or a hint of a transparent base. Really, the star of inside the pan is literally the particles of glitters. They are of different textures, different colors. Sometimes you get even duochromes as well. ROMAND glitters do have that base pigment to it. For ROMAND, especially the smaller refined glitters, it's almost like a slap of color and glitter on your hand, and it's just that whole swatch of where you apply it. So this is the Unleasha one, and this is actually the smaller glitters over here. This is how it looks like, and I will swatch it for you guys over here, and then we go down like this. As you can see over here, there's really no base pigment to it, just the pure wetness of the glitter itself. For ROMAND, this is the glitter over here, so of course the color like low-key plays a part as well, but this is how it looks like. I'll swatch it like right next to it here. You can see the base pigment is there, right? I know I said I wanted to compare Mahogany Garden only, but I do have this Rosebud Garden one also from ROMAND. This is the glitter over here. You can see this is another one over here, and we're gonna go down. I mean, it's very pretty, you cannot deny, right? But when I swatch it like this, I definitely can feel the product just gritting against the skin. And you know, this is the back of my hand, it's not that bad, but when it's my eyes, it's a very sensitive and delicate area. I'm not really sure if I want such a intense and not so gentle formula on my eyelids, so that's why I'm a little bit kind of thing towards this particular smaller refined glitters of ROMAND. Now personally for me, when it comes to the chunkier glitters, I would call them the chunky hunky glitters. You can see that both of these palettes, they do have that. They are different in terms of formula. I think that the ROMAND one feels a little bit more like gluey per se, and it might be a little bit trickier to handle, like especially for beginners, or if you don't have the right tool to apply the glitters and you just go in with your finger and you start like going in like this. You can do that, there's nothing wrong with it, but you won't get like the nicest finish in my humble opinion. One thing I noticed in newer ROMAND palettes is that they do not do this chunky hunky glitter finish anymore. In the original lineups of the ROMAND Better Than palettes, they do have it, as well as for like Rosebud Garden. So these two were in the original lineup. I do have two newer ones. I have the Chromie palette over here, and I can tell that they're trying to replace the chunky hunky glitters with this type of marbled cream shimmer effect, and I can swatch it for you guys over here. You can see it's still really wet and reflective, but it's not as abrasive as compared to maybe like the glitter formula, and you still get that very nice wet shine. Journey Nude Garden, really, it was a very matte heavy palette, and you only have like these two shimmer shades. They are nothing really too special. I am a little bit of a snob when it comes to wet eyeshadows. They are just regular shadows in my humble opinion. So this one over here, this one over here, they're just regular like toppers. They're not super like wet looking. For glitters, I do prefer the Unleasha ones because the glitter particles, although they are like 15 to 20% smaller than the ROMAND ones, it's not really that noticeable in real life, but when I put it side to side, I can kind of see it. But I think that the formula of the glitters is a little bit more refined. It's much easier to use. I still think that for chunky hunky glitters like this, you still will have to go in with a tool or a little like brush to go in and start placing it on your eyes to make it look bling, I would say. Now when it comes to longevity and adhesion of these eyeshadows, I must say that every single time without fail, whenever I wear eyeshadow, I am wearing an eyeshadow primer. Eyeshadow primer is key in making sure to make your eyeshadows look good and adhere throughout the entire day. It extends the wear of your shadows as well, especially for Korean shadows. By nature, Korean shadows are a little bit more drier, not as creamy as compared to Western shadows. In general, on an 8-hour work day, I wouldn't notice any like extreme fading of my shadows, and they just wear well throughout the entire day. It's a reasonable wear. I don't expect everything to be there by the end of the day. However, even though I do have an eyeshadow primer on, I do notice some fallout. A little bit right now. As you can see under my eyes, you can see this side over here, you both have some like fallout, but it's not crazy fallout. You know, if you were to take like a brush like this and you just like go in and start wiping it off, you get most of it off, and you know, try your best to not like scratch your eyes or whatsoever, because that is how the shimmer or glitter particles will actually fall. If you're of darker skin, I can only recommend the Glitterpedia All of Glitter palette, because these glitters do not really have a base color to it, and this is a great additional palette in your collection. Use this, layer it on top of like other eyeshadows that works for you, add this on top, and you just have that effortless looking pretty wet eyeshadow look. If you are a beginner or just wanting to explore makeup, checking out some glitters, I will recommend the UNLEASHIA All of Brown palette. This is the second number 2 palette, and that's because the mattes are easier to work with. They are buttery smooth. I think for drier eyeshadows, if you're more experienced with makeup, it's easier for you to like use and navigate, but when it comes to, I understand, beginner makeup, you just want something easy to work with and you don't want it to be so fussy, so I totally understand. This glitter palette, I think, is a nice mix of, you know, daily wear shadows as well as you get those glitters to actually experiment and play along. Overall, if you're asking me, Crystal, which one would you pick? Honestly, it really depends on what's your preference, what do you like, because makeup is a very personal thing. What you may like something, I may not like something, vice versa, and that's totally okay because we're all here with our own personal preference, and that is fine. Buy something that will fit your needs and what that you would like. Make yourself happy, sister. Let me know, have you tried out ROMAND or UNLEASHIA's eyeshadow palettes, and if you did, what do you think about them? Do you like it, dislike it? Drop it down in the comments below. I love to chit chat with you guys. And if you would like to check out my warm versus cool video, I did do a comparison half and half face. I did use the ROMAND Peony Nude Garden and the Mahogany Garden, which is what I have on my eyes right now, side by side. So if you'd love to see that, you can click on this video over here.